The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, crisp and official, sitting on my kitchen counter like a death sentence. Simon had left them there before disappearing forever, taking our 8-year-old daughter Ava with him. How did we get here? How did my marriage crumble so completely that my own husband gathered evidence against me like I was some common criminal? It started with one decision, made in our own bedroom, that changed everything forever. The master bedroom felt different that afternoon. Maybe it was the way the sunlight streamed through the curtains, or maybe it was the anticipation coursing through my veins as I waited for Felix to arrive. Simon was at his accounting firm, working late again like he always did. Our daughter Ava was at my mother's house for the weekend. I smoothed the comforter one more time, checking my reflection in the dresser mirror. At 34, I still looked good. Better than good, actually. My auburn hair fell in waves past my shoulders, and the emerald dress I'd chosen hugged my curves perfectly. Simon never noticed anymore. When was the last time he'd complimented me? When was the last time he'd looked at me with desire instead of that distant, analytical stare? Felix noticed. Felix made me feel alive again. My phone buzzed. "Almost there, beautiful. Can't wait to see you." I deleted the message immediately, a habit I'd perfected over the past month. Simon was suspicious by nature. Came with being an accountant, I suppose. But he wasn't stupid. I had to be careful. The doorbell rang at exactly 3:30. Felix was always punctual, unlike my husband who'd been coming home later and later, claiming work obligations. I smoothed my dress and opened the door. "Hey, gorgeous," Felix smiled, his dark eyes twinkling with mischief. At 31, he had that boyish charm that made my heart race. His job as a bartender at Murphy's downtown kept him in good shape, and his easy laugh was such a contrast to Simon's perpetual seriousness. "Come in quickly," I whispered, glancing at the neighbors' houses. Mrs. Peterson was always watching from her front window, the nosy old bat. Felix pulled me into his arms the moment the door closed, kissing me with a passion I'd forgotten existed. "I've been thinking about you all morning," he murmured against my neck. "Simon's working late again," I said, leading him toward the stairs. "We have hours. In your bedroom?" Felix raised an eyebrow. "That's bold, even for you." I felt a thrill of rebellion. He doesn't care about me anymore. He barely touches me, barely talks to me. I'm like a piece of furniture to him. It wasn't entirely true, but it felt true in that moment. Simon had been distant lately, yes, but maybe I'd been distant too. Maybe I'd stopped trying just as much as he had. But those thoughts were too complicated, too uncomfortable. It was easier to blame him. We spent the afternoon in the bed I shared with my husband, and I told myself I felt no guilt. Simon had pushed me to this with his coldness, his emotional unavailability. If he'd been a better husband, I wouldn't need Felix. Afterwards, as Felix dozed beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when everything had gone wrong. Simon and I used to be happy, didn't we? We'd met at a friend's party 8 years ago, married within 2 years, had Ava shortly after, but somewhere along the way, we'd become strangers sharing a house. My phone buzzed. "Simon. Leaving office now, be home in 20. Panic shot through me. He wasn't supposed to be home for hours. "Felix, wake up." I shook him gently. "Simon's coming home early." Felix sat up quickly, running his hands through his tousled hair. "Shit, really?" "Get dressed now." I was already pulling on my clothes, my mind racing. The bedroom smelled like sex and Felix's cologne. I sprayed air freshener frantically while Felix dressed. "What do I do?" Felix asked, panic creeping into his voice. "Back door, through the garden. Mrs. Peterson won't see you from there." I kissed him quickly and pushed him toward the stairs. "I'll text you later." I stripped the bed with record speed, throwing the sheets into the washing machine and remaking it with fresh ones. I changed into jeans and a t-shirt, washed my face, and was stirring pasta sauce on the stove when Simon's car pulled into the driveway. "Hey," he said, walking into the kitchen. His dark hair was disheveled, and his tie was loose around his neck. At 36, he was still handsome in that quiet, serious way that had first attracted me, but now his brown eyes seemed to look right through me. "You're home early," I said, proud of how casual I sounded. "Finished the Morrison account ahead of schedule." He loosened his tie completely, studying my face. "You seem flustered." "Just rushing to get dinner ready. I wasn't expecting you." Simon nodded slowly, but something in his expression made my stomach clench. He walked to the window looking out at the backyard. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine." But his voice was flat, distant. He turned back to me, and for a moment his eyes seemed to bore into my soul. "I'm going to shower." I listened to his footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of the shower running. My hands shook as I stirred the sauce. Had he seen Felix leaving? Had I missed something? When Simon came down for dinner, he was quiet. Not unusual, he was always quiet, but this felt different. Heavy, loaded. "Where's Ava?" he asked, cutting his chicken with methodical precision. "At Mom's, remember? I told you yesterday." "Right." He chewed thoughtfully. "How was your day?" The question felt like a trap. "Boring. Cleaned the house, did some laundry. You know, the usual." Simon nodded, but his eyes never left my face. The washing machine was running when I got home. "I spilled coffee on the sheets this morning," I lied smoothly. "Had to wash them." "Coffee?" It wasn't a question, just a flat repetition. "Yes, coffee. Are you interrogating me?" "Just making conversation." But his tone suggested otherwise. We ate the rest of dinner in silence, the tension thick enough to cut. When Simon excused himself to his home office, I felt like I could breathe again. But as I cleaned up the dishes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The way he'd looked at me, studied me, it was like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. My phone buzzed. "Felix, that was close. You okay?" I deleted the message immediately and went to bed early, claiming a headache. Simon stayed in his office until well past midnight. When he finally came to bed, he lay on his side of the mattress like a stranger, not touching me, not speaking. In the darkness, I told myself everything was fine. Simon suspected nothing. I was being paranoid, but deep down, I knew something had changed that afternoon. The way Simon had stared at me, the weight of his silence, it felt like the beginning of an end I wasn't ready to face. Maya Lynn had always been my closest friend, ever since we'd started working together at Henderson Insurance 3 years ago. She was the kind of friend who'd cover for you, lie for you, encourage your worst impulses with a laugh and a wink. Which is exactly what I needed the next morning as I sat across from her in our usual corner booth at Rosie's Cafe. "You look like you haven't slept," Maya observed, sipping her latte. At 33, she was still single by choice, claiming marriage was a prison for women who've given up on themselves. Her black hair was cut in a sharp bob, and her red lipstick was perfect despite the early hour. "Simon was acting weird last night," I admitted, stirring sugar into my coffee with shaking hands. "Weird how?" I glanced around the cafe, making sure no one was listening. "I think he might suspect something." Maya leaned forward, eyes bright with interest. "About your mystery man, the one you won't tell me about." I'd been dropping hints about my affair for weeks, enjoying the way Maya hung on every detail while keeping Felix's identity secret. It made me feel powerful, like I had this delicious secret that was mine alone. "Maybe. He came home early yesterday and—" I trailed off, remembering the panic, the rushed cleanup, Simon's penetrating stare. "And what? Did he catch you?" "No, nothing like that, but he kept asking questions. Looking at me like he knew something." Maya rolled her eyes. "Honey, you're being paranoid. Men like Simon are clueless about this stuff. They're so wrapped up in their spreadsheets and tax codes, they wouldn't notice if you brought your boyfriend home for dinner. You don't know Simon. He's observant, analytical." which is exactly why he's boring you to death. Maya reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Listen, you deserve to feel alive again. You deserve passion and excitement. If Simon can't give you that, then you have every right to find it elsewhere. This was why I loved Maya. She understood. She didn't judge me or lecture me about marriage vows. She saw what I saw, that Simon had driven me to this with his coldness, his emotional distance. But what if he finds out? Then you deal with it when it happens. You can't live your life walking on eggshells, waiting for permission to be happy. Maya's voice grew fierce. You're 34 years old, Ligeia. You're beautiful, intelligent, vibrant. Don't let some emotionally unavailable man make you feel guilty for wanting more. Her words were like a balm to my conscience. This wasn't my fault. I wasn't the villain here. I was a woman who'd been neglected, taken for granted, pushed to find affection elsewhere. You're right, I said, feeling stronger already. I deserve better than what Simon's giving me. Damn right you do. So tell me about this mystery man. Is he good in bed? I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Maya, what? I'm living vicariously through you here. Some of us don't have secret boyfriends to spice up our lives. I glanced around again, then leaned closer. He's incredible. Attentive, passionate, makes me feel like a goddess. Everything Simon doesn't do. Exactly. The words felt bitter on my tongue, but also liberating. Simon treats me like a roommate he occasionally has sex with. When was the last time he brought me flowers? When was the last time he told me I was beautiful? See, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just taking care of your own needs since your husband won't. We spent another hour dissecting my marriage, with Maya encouraging every grievance, validating every complaint. By the time we left the cafe, I felt justified in my affair. More than justified, I felt righteous. That evening, I called my mother while Simon was upstairs putting Ava to bed. Helen Price had always been protective of me, sometimes to a fault. At 58, she still treated me like her little girl who could do no wrong. How are things with Simon? She asked, after we'd caught up on family news. Difficult, I said, lowering my voice. He's been so distant lately, so cold. I don't know what to do anymore. Oh, honey, I'm sorry. Marriage is hard work, especially with men like Simon. What do you mean, men like Simon? Mom sighed. He's always been so serious, so controlled. Even at your wedding, he seemed more focused on the logistics than the romance. I've always wondered if he's capable of the kind of emotional intimacy you need. Her words hit me like validation from heaven. Even my mother saw it. Simon was the problem, not me. I feel so alone in this marriage, Mum, like I'm married to a stranger. Have you tried talking to him about it? Of course, but he just shuts down, says everything's fine, goes back to his work. I can't compete with spreadsheets and tax returns. Maybe you need some space to figure things out. You could always come stay with me for a while, bring Ava. I'm not ready for that yet, but it's good to know I have options. After hanging up, I felt even more confident in my choices. My best friend supported me. My mother understood my struggles. The problem wasn't me. It was Simon and his inability to be the husband I needed. But that confidence wavered when Simon's mother called the next day. Ligeia, dear, how are you? Doris Carruthers had always been polite to me, but there was a coolness in her voice that hadn't been there before. I'm fine, Doris. How are you? Concerned about my son, actually. He seems troubled lately, distracted. My heart skipped a beat. Oh? He seems fine to me. Does he? Because when I spoke to him yesterday, he sounded different. Sad, maybe, or worried. Work's been stressful, I said quickly. You know how he gets during tax season. It's not tax season, dear. The silence stretched between us, loaded with unspoken accusations. Well, I'm sure whatever it is will pass, I said finally. I hope so. Simon's a good man, Ligeia. He deserves to be happy. The implication was clear. She thought I wasn't making him happy. The unfairness of it made my blood boil. What about my happiness? What about what I deserved? Of course he does, I said through gritted teeth. I'm having the family over for dinner this Sunday. I hope you'll come. It wasn't really a request. Doris Carruthers expected her family to show up when summoned, and that included me by marriage. We'll be there, I promised. But as I hung up, I felt a chill of foreboding. Doris had always been protective of Simon, sometimes to an annoying degree. If she suspected something was wrong in our marriage, she'd start digging. And Doris Carruthers was like a dog with a bone when it came to protecting her family. That night at dinner, I studied Simon's face, looking for signs of whatever his mother had detected. He seemed normal to me, quiet, focused on his food, asking Ava about her day at school. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe his normal was actually depression, and I'd been too wrapped up in my own drama to notice. Your mother called today, I said casually. Simon looked up, fork halfway to his mouth. Oh? She's worried about you, says you seem troubled. I'm fine. That's what I told her, but she seemed convinced something was wrong. Simon set down his fork and really looked at me for the first time in weeks. His brown eyes were unreadable, but there was an intensity there that made me squirm. Do you think something's wrong, Ligeia? The question felt loaded, dangerous. No. Should I? I don't know. Should you? We stared at each other across the dinner table, and I felt like we were having two different conversations. On the surface, we were discussing his mother's concerns, but underneath, something else was happening. Something that made my skin crawl with anxiety. Daddy, can I have more milk? Ava's voice broke the tension. Of course, sweetheart. Simon got up to refill her glass, and the moment passed. But that night, as I lay in bed listening to Simon's breathing, I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. His mother suspected something. Maya was encouraging me to be bolder. My mother was ready to take sides. And Simon was watching, waiting, planning something I couldn't quite see yet. I reached for my phone to text Felix, then stopped. What if Simon was monitoring my phone somehow? What if he'd installed some kind of tracking software? I deleted the unsent message and put the phone away, but sleep didn't come easily. In the darkness, I could feel the weight of Simon's attention, like a physical presence. And for the first time since my affair began, I wondered if I was in over my head. The idea came to me on Friday morning as I was planning our monthly dinner party. We'd been hosting these gatherings for years. Friends from work, neighbors, family. It was my chance to play the perfect hostess, to show everyone how well I managed our home and social life. But this time, I wanted to push boundaries. I wanted to see how far I could go. Maya, what if you brought a friend to dinner tomorrow night? I asked during our morning coffee break at work. What kind of friend? She asked, though her knowing smile suggested she already understood. Someone fun, someone who might liven up the conversation. You mean Felix? I glanced around the break room to make sure we were alone. Maybe. Maya laughed, delighted. Ligeia, you're playing with fire. Simon won't suspect anything. He barely pays attention to our guests anyway. He'll just see another friend of yours. And what's your end game here? What do you get out of having your lover and your husband in the same room? I thought about it, trying to articulate the thrill that ran through me at the idea. Control, I guess. The power of knowing something Simon doesn't. And maybe... I hesitated. Maybe what? Maybe I want to see them side by side, compare them, see what I'm missing, what I've gained. Maya shook her head, but she was still smiling. You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. That evening, I called Felix from my car in the grocery store parking lot. I'd started making these calls away from home, paranoid about Simon overhearing. Hey, beautiful, Felix answered on the first ring. Miss me already? Always. Listen, I have a proposition for you. I explained about the dinner party, watching a young mother load groceries into her car while her toddler demanded attention. Such a simple life, uncomplicated by secrets and lies. For a moment, I envied her. "You want me to come to your house? With your husband there?" Felix sounded incredulous. "You'd be Maya's guest. Simon won't think anything of it." "Ligeia, that's insane. What if he figures it out?" "He won't. Simon's oblivious to anything that doesn't involve numbers or tax codes. Besides, it'll be fun. A little dangerous, but fun." Felix was quiet for a long moment. "You really think we can pull this off?" "I know we can. Just act like Maya's friend. Be charming, but not too charming. And whatever you do, don't look at me like you want to rip my clothes off." He laughed. "I'll try to restrain myself." Saturday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth for October. I'd spent the day cooking Simon's favorite dishes: herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, chocolate mousse for dessert. The dining room table gleamed under the chandelier, set with our best china and crystal. I'd chosen my outfit carefully: a black cocktail dress that was elegant but not too sexy, diamond earrings Simon had given me for our 5th anniversary. I wanted to look beautiful, but not like I was trying too hard. Simon emerged from his shower at 6:30, looking handsome in dark slacks and a blue button-down that brought out his eyes. For a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with him. He had a quiet confidence, a steadiness that had once made me feel safe. "You look nice," he said, adjusting his watch. "Thank you. So do you." It was the first compliment we'd exchanged in weeks, and it felt strange on my tongue. The first guests arrived at 7, our neighbors Jim and Carol Peterson, followed by my coworker Beth and her husband Mike. Maya arrived fashionably late at 7:15, Felix beside her. My heart hammered as I opened the door to them. Felix looked incredible in a charcoal grey suit that fit him perfectly. His dark hair was styled just right, and his smile was warm, but appropriately platonic. "Simon, this is Felix Mason," Maya said smoothly. "He's a friend from my yoga class." Felix extended his hand with just the right amount of confidence. "Nice to meet you, Simon. Maya's told me a lot about you." "All good things, I hope," Simon replied, shaking hands. His expression was polite but neutral, the same face he wore when meeting any new acquaintance. "Absolutely. She says you're some kind of financial wizard." "Just an accountant," Simon said with a modest smile. I watched this exchange with fascination. Here were the two most important men in my life making small talk in my foyer, and Simon had no idea he was shaking hands with his wife's lover. The power of it was intoxicating. Dinner conversation flowed easily. Felix was charming without being overpowering, asking Simon about his work, complimenting the food, making everyone laugh with stories from the bar. He was perfect, attentive enough to be memorable, but not so much that Simon would suspect anything. But I found myself stealing glances at him throughout the evening, remembering the way his hands felt on my skin, the way he whispered my name when we were alone. And once or twice, I caught him looking at me with barely concealed hunger before he quickly looked away. "This salmon is incredible, Ligeia," Felix said during the main course. "You're an amazing cook." "Thank you," I replied, feeling heat creep up my neck. "It's Simon's favorite dish." "Lucky man," Felix said, and for just a moment, his eyes held mine a beat too long. I glanced at Simon, but he was cutting his fish methodically, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrent. After dinner, we moved to the living room for drinks and dessert. I served the chocolate mousse while Simon poured wine, playing the perfect host couple. But I was hyper-aware of Felix's presence, the way he sat on our couch, the way he complimented our home. "You have a beautiful place," he told Simon. "That's quite a view of the garden." "Ligeia's the gardener," Simon replied. "I just write the checks for the landscaping." Everyone laughed, but I noticed Simon's eyes flick to me, then to Felix, then back again. Was he picking up on something, or was I being paranoid? As the evening wound down, guests began making their exit. Felix lingered, helping Maya with her coat. "Thanks for including me," he told Simon. "It's been a great evening." "Any friend of Maya's is welcome here," Simon replied automatically. But as Felix shook his hand goodbye, I saw something flicker across Simon's face. Suspicion? Recognition? Or was I imagining things? After everyone left, I busied myself clearing dishes and loading the dishwasher, my mind racing. Had I pushed too far? Had Felix been too obvious? "Interesting evening," Simon said, loosening his tie. "Good turnout. Everyone seemed to have fun. Maya's friend was charming." I kept my voice carefully neutral. "Felix? Yes, he seems nice. Handsome guy. Single?" My hand stilled on the wine glasses I was rinsing. "I think so. Why?" "Just wondering. He seemed very attentive to you." The blood in my veins turned to ice. "What do you mean?" Simon moved closer, his reflection appearing in the kitchen window behind me. "The way he looked at you. The compliments. Most men don't notice another man's wife quite so thoroughly." I forced a laugh. "You're imagining things. He was just being polite." "Was he?" I turned to face him, putting on my most innocent expression. "Simon, are you seriously suggesting that Maya's friend was flirting with me, at our dinner party, with you sitting right there?" "I'm not suggesting anything, just making an observation. A paranoid observation." Simon studied my face for a long moment, and I felt like he was looking straight through me, seeing all my secrets laid bare. "Maybe," he said finally. "Maybe I am being paranoid." But his tone suggested he didn't believe that for a second. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Simon slept beside me. Had I made a terrible mistake? Had my need for excitement, for the thrill of danger, finally pushed things too far? My phone buzzed softly. A text from Felix. "That was incredible. You looked so beautiful tonight. When can I see you again?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Beside me, Simon shifted in his sleep, and for one terrifying moment, I thought he might be awake, watching me. But his breathing remained steady, and eventually, I drifted off to sleep, dreaming of being caught in a web of my own making, with no way out and nowhere to run. I should have known Simon was planning something when he started working late every night. For 3 weeks after the dinner party, he left the house by 7 in the morning and didn't return until after 9 at night. When I asked about it, he claimed a big client was demanding extra attention, but something in his tone made me uneasy. "Henderson Industries is expanding into 3 new states," he explained one evening as he loosened his tie. "They need a complete financial restructure before the end of the year." It sounded plausible. Simon had always been dedicated to his work, sometimes obsessively so, but there was something different about these late nights. He seemed energized rather than exhausted, focused in a way that reminded me of a hunter tracking prey. I used his absence to my advantage, of course. Felix and I met twice that week at his apartment, and once I was bold enough to bring him back to our house while Ava was at school. The thrill of it was addictive, making love in the bed I shared with my husband while he was across town, completely unaware. "This is dangerous," Felix murmured against my neck as we lay tangled in my sheets. "What if he comes home early again?" "He won't. He's obsessed with this new client." "You seem different lately, more reckless." I traced patterns on his chest, enjoying the solid warmth of him. Maybe I'm tired of sneaking around, tired of feeling guilty about wanting to be happy. "Are you thinking about leaving him?" The question hung in the air between us. Was I? The idea had been creeping into my thoughts more and more lately. Life with Felix would be so different, passionate, spontaneous, alive. No more walking on eggshells around Simon's moods. No more feeling like a piece of furniture in my own home. "Maybe," I admitted. "Would you want that?" Felix pulled me closer, kissing the top of my head. "I want whatever makes you happy." It wasn't exactly a declaration of love, but it was enough to fuel my fantasies of a different life. Meanwhile, my friendship with Maya was deepening around our shared secret. She'd become my confidant, my cheerleader, the one person who understood what I was going through. You're glowing, she observed over lunch at our usual cafe. The affair is agreeing with you. I feel more like myself than I have in years, I admitted. More alive, more confident. See, this is what happens when you stop settling for less than you deserve. You remember who you really are. Simon's been working late every night. I barely see him anymore. Maya rolled her eyes. Typical. He's probably realized he's losing you and he's throwing himself into work instead of fighting for his marriage. Or maybe he's just focused on his client. Honey, when a man starts working late every single night, it's either because he's having an affair himself or he's avoiding dealing with problems at home. Either way, it proves you made the right choice. Her logic seemed sound, and it eased the guilt that sometimes crept in during quiet moments. Simon was choosing work over our marriage, just like he always had. I was simply choosing something better. But I started noticing small things that made me uncomfortable. Items in our bedroom seemed slightly out of place. My jewelry box moved an inch to the left, my perfume bottles rearranged. The laptop I kept in the kitchen was sometimes warm when I came home, as if someone had been using it recently. You're being paranoid, Maya assured me when I mentioned it. Simon's not the type to go through your things. He's too proper, too respectful of boundaries. She was right, of course. Simon had never been the jealous, snooping type. He trusted people until they gave him reason not to, and I'd been careful not to give him that reason. Or so I thought. The first real sign that something was wrong came on a Thursday evening in November. I'd spent the afternoon with Felix at his apartment and arrived home to find Simon's car already in the driveway. Panic shot through me. He wasn't supposed to be home for hours. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, making sure I looked normal, then grabbed the grocery bags I'd picked up as an alibi and headed inside. You're home early, I called out, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. Meeting got cancelled, Simon replied from the living room. His voice was neutral, but something in it made my skin prickle. I found him sitting in his favorite chair, still wearing his suit but with his tie removed. He was holding a manila folder in his lap, and his expression was unreadable. What's that? I asked, nodding toward the folder. Work stuff. How was your day? Fine. Boring. Did some shopping. Had lunch with Maya. The lies came so easily now, I barely had to think about them. Maya. He said her name like he was tasting something unpleasant. You two have been spending a lot of time together lately. She's my best friend. We've always spent time together. Have you? Simon opened the folder and pulled out what looked like a photograph. Because according to this, Maya was at work until 5:30 today. Funny, since you said you had lunch with her. My blood turned to ice. The photograph showed me walking into Felix's apartment building at 2:15 in the afternoon, timestamp clearly visible in the corner. My mind raced, trying to find an explanation. Any explanation that would make sense. That's not... How did you... I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago, Simon said calmly, as if he was discussing the weather. After our dinner party, when I started noticing things, small things at first, your phone always face down, new lingerie I didn't buy, the way you jumped when I came home unexpectedly. He pulled out more photographs, me and Felix at the cafe where we'd met twice, me entering his apartment building on 3 different occasions, me kissing him goodbye in the parking lot behind Murphy's bar. Simon, I can explain. Can you? He stood up, the folder in his hands like a weapon. Can you explain why you've been lying to me for months? Can you explain why you brought your lover to our home, introduced him to our friends, made me shake his hand and welcome him into our life? The word lover sounded ugly coming from his mouth, making what Felix and I had seemed sordid and cheap. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. Simon's voice was still calm, but there was a coldness in it I'd never heard before. You're having an affair, Ligeia. You've been using our bed, our home, our marriage as cover for your relationship with Felix Mason. Hearing Felix's name from Simon's lips was like a slap. He knew everything. Felix's name, where he worked, where he lived. The investigation had been thorough. "Simon, please let me explain. Our marriage has been in trouble for months. We've been like strangers, and I was lonely. And Felix made me feel..." "Feel what? Alive? Special? Desired?" Simon's composure finally cracked, and I saw the pain beneath his anger. "Do you think I didn't notice how distant you've been? Do you think I didn't try to reach you? But instead of talking to me, instead of working on our marriage, you decided to find comfort in another man's bed." Tears started flowing down my cheeks. "I never meant for this to happen. It just did." "Nothing just happens, Ligeia. You made choices. Every time you met him, every time you lied to me, every time you brought him into our home. Those were choices." "What are you going to do?" I whispered. Simon looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something die in his eyes. Whatever love he'd had for me, whatever hope he'd held on to for our marriage, it was gone. "I'm going to protect myself and our daughter," he said quietly. "I've already consulted with a lawyer. I've documented everything, the affair, the lies, the financial records showing money you've spent on gifts for him." "Gifts?" My voice was barely a whisper. "The watch you bought him last month, the expensive dinners, the hotel room you paid for 2 weeks ago when you told me you were visiting your sister." He pulled out credit card statements, each incriminating charge highlighted in yellow. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" I had been careless, I realized, so caught up in the excitement of the affair that I'd stopped covering my tracks properly. The watch had been an impulse purchase, a celebration of what I'd thought was Felix falling in love with me. The hotel had been Felix's idea. He'd wanted somewhere nicer than his apartment, and I'd been happy to pay. "Simon, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, we can..." "No." The finality in his voice cut through me like a blade. "I'm done, Ligeia. I'm done with the lies, done with the betrayal, done pretending we have a marriage worth saving." He walked toward the stairs, then turned back. "I'll be staying at my mother's for the next few days while I figure out the logistics. I suggest you use that time to find a lawyer of your own." "What about Ava?" "What about her? Did you think about her when you were destroying our family? Did you consider how this would affect our daughter when you decided your happiness was more important than her stability?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Of course I'd thought about Ava. I was doing this for her too, wasn't I? Showing her that women didn't have to settle for loveless marriages, that they could choose happiness. But as I watched Simon climb the stairs to pack a bag, I realized how hollow that justification sounded. I hadn't been thinking about anyone but myself. An hour later, Simon left with a suitcase and his laptop, not looking back as he drove away. The house felt enormous and empty without him, and for the first time since my affair began, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. I called Felix, needing to hear his voice, needing reassurance that what we had was worth the destruction of my marriage. "He knows," I said when he answered. "Knows what?" "Everything. He hired a private investigator. He has photographs, financial records, everything." Felix was quiet for a long moment. "Shit, what does this mean for us?" "I don't know. He's filing for divorce." "Maybe that's for the best. Now we can be together openly." But something in his tone suggested he wasn't as thrilled by that prospect as I'd hoped. The reality of being with a divorced woman with a child was very different from the excitement of a secret affair. "Felix, do you love me?" Another pause, longer this time. "Of course I care about you. You know that." It wasn't the answer I needed, and we both knew it. That night, I lay alone in the bed, where my marriage had effectively ended, staring at the ceiling and wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. I'd thought I was taking control of my life, choosing happiness over settling. Instead, I'd destroyed everything I'd built over 8 years of marriage, and I wasn't even sure what I'd gained in return. The whispers started at Ava's school the following Monday. I noticed them immediately. The way conversation stopped when I walked by, the sideways glances from other mothers, the sudden fascination with phones when I approached the pickup line. Simon had wasted no time in telling his family about my affair, and apparently, word was spreading. Mrs. Carruthers? Ava's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, approached me after dismissal with a concerned expression. Could I speak with you for a moment? My stomach clenched. Of course. Ava seems upset today. She mentioned that Daddy isn't living at home anymore. Is everything all right? I forced a smile, aware that several other parents were within earshot. Just a temporary situation. Simon's mother has been ill, so he's staying with her for a few days to help out. The lie came smoothly, but Mrs. Rodriguez didn't look convinced. I see. Well, if there's anything the school can do to support Ava during this difficult time, please let us know. The way she said difficult time made it clear she knew more than she was letting on. Someone had been talking. As I walked Ava to the car, I noticed Doris Carruthers standing near the school entrance, talking intently with two other grandmothers. When she saw me, her face hardened into an expression of pure disgust. "Grandma Doris!" Ava broke away from me and ran to her grandmother, who scooped her up in a fierce hug. "Hello, sweetheart. How was school today?" "Okay, I guess. When is Daddy coming home?" "I miss him." Doris's eyes met mine over Ava's head, and the hatred there was unmistakable. "Soon, baby. Very soon." "Ava, we need to go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Say goodbye to Grandma." "Actually," Doris said, not loosening her grip on Ava, "I was hoping to take her for ice cream. If that's all right with you, of course." The challenge in her voice was clear. She was daring me to refuse, to make a scene in front of the other parents and teachers. "I suppose that would be fine," I said through gritted teeth, "but I'll need her home by 6 for dinner." "Of course." Doris's smile was razor sharp. "We wouldn't want to disrupt her routine any more than it already has been." I watched helplessly as Doris led Ava away, knowing my daughter would be poisoned against me for hours. Next morning, Maya cornered me. "Simon called. He knows I've been covering for you. Phone records, everything. If he goes to HR, he wouldn't. I can't be associated with this scandal anymore. I need to distance myself." "You're abandoning me. You used me to destroy your marriage. I'm done." Our friendship died instantly. By lunch, the office atmosphere had shifted. Conversation stopped when I entered. Invitations vanished. That evening, Felix called. "This situation's gotten complicated. I think we should take a step back. You're abandoning me when I need you most." Maybe we confused excitement with love. I'd lost everything. Husband, friend, lover, reputation, all for nothing. The law office radiated quiet authority, mahogany furniture, leather books, an atmosphere that made me feel small. Simon sat distant, treating me like a stranger, rather than his wife of 8 years. "My client seeks dissolution on grounds of adultery, primary custody, and asset division," Peterson announced, spreading photographs across the table. There I was, entering Felix's building, kissing him, buying expensive gifts with our joint account money. 17 meetings, $3,000 spent, repeated lies about her whereabouts. Jennifer tried defending me weakly, but Peterson continued relentlessly. Phone records, bank statements, hotel receipts, all documented. "Do you dispute these facts?" Peterson asked. "No," I whispered. "Any justification?" Simon was distant. Did he abuse, cheat, or refuse counseling? No. By day's end, I'd lost everything: custody, assets, dignity, destroyed for a man who'd already moved on.